"Grandpa, my parents will take your money after the party today," whispered my 8-year-old granddaughter, and her words struck like thunder, shattering the illusion of family love. I, a trusting grandfather who had always supported them, left early, hiding my shock behind a mask of fatigue. But what I did next, a cunning plan for revenge for their betrayal, shocked everyone. I beat them at their own game, and they will never forget it. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I know what you're thinking, Dad, but hear me out. Harry's voice cracked through the phone, cutting through the Saturday morning, quiet like a rusty blade. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. 7 a.m. calls weren't Harry's style, especially not with that nervous tremor I recognized from his teenage years when he'd wrecked my truck. "What sounds strange, son?" I settled back into my kitchen chair, watching steam rise from my coffee while morning light painted golden squares across yesterday's unread newspaper. "Well, Mary really wants... we both think you should definitely come to Alexa's birthday party today." The words tumbled out too fast, like he'd rehearsed them but forgotten the rhythm. Something cold settled in my chest. Since when did they need to convince me to see my granddaughter? "Harry, when have I ever missed one of Alexa's birthdays?" No, that's not what I meant." A pause. I heard what sounded like Mary's voice in the background, sharp and insistent. "It's just that Mary's been planning this for weeks, and she specifically asked me to call and make sure you're coming." I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the cream swirl into tiny hurricanes. Mary specifically asking? The same Mary who usually treated my presence like a necessary inconvenience? That's thoughtful of her. "Yeah, she's really excited about it." Harry's laugh sounded forced, metallic. "The party starts at 2, but maybe you could come a little early. We wanted to talk about some family stuff." The spoon clinked against the mug as I set it down. Family stuff. In 3 years of widowhood, family stuff had never required special conversations. What kind of family stuff? "Oh, just planning things, future things. Mary has some ideas about how we can all be more involved with each other." I walked to the window, phone pressed to my ear, watching Mrs. Henderson across the street. Water her flower boxes, Mary with ideas about family involvement. The woman who'd spent Christmas dinner last year checking her phone every 5 minutes. "That sounds nice, Harry." I kept my voice level, but my businessman's instincts were screaming. 30 years of reading people across conference tables had taught me when someone was selling something they didn't believe in themselves. "Great. So you'll be there early? Maybe around 1:30? I glanced at the refrigerator, where Alexa's latest drawing hung next to my shopping list. A crooked house with stick figures labeled Grandpa, Daddy, Mommy, and me in purple crayon. That little girl was the brightest spot in my world since Ellen died. Of course I'll be there early. I wouldn't miss Alexa's day for anything. "Perfect. And Dad?" Harry's voice dropped lower. "Just keep an open mind about what we want to discuss, okay? It's all about making sure everyone's taken care of." The line went dead before I could ask what he meant by everyone's taken care of. I stared at the phone for a long moment, then set it on the counter next to my untouched newspaper. Something wasn't right. Harry's voice had carried that same guilty undertone I remembered from when he was 8 and had borrowed money from Ellen's purse for candy. But this felt bigger than childhood mischief. I poured fresh coffee and tried to shake off the unease. Maybe Mary genuinely wanted to improve family relationships. Maybe I was reading too much into a simple invitation. But as I sat back down with my coffee, I couldn't stop thinking about that phrase, making sure everyone's taken care of. In my experience, when people started talking about taking care of everyone, they usually meant taking care of themselves first. I looked at Alexa's drawing again and smiled despite my concerns. Whatever Harry and Mary had planned to discuss, it could wait until after I'd celebrated my granddaughter's 8th birthday. Some things were more important than adult complications. Still, I made a mental note to listen carefully to whatever they want to talk about. 20 minutes later, I stood in my bedroom closet, staring at shirts Ellen would never see me wear again. The blue Oxford brought back her funeral, how Mary had whispered about all this space while we buried my wife. Even then, something in her tone had felt calculating. I pulled the shirt from its hanger and caught my reflection in the mirror. $70,000. That's what I'd given them over the past 3 years. Mortgage payments, car loans, Alexa's private school tuition. Ellen would have called it excessive, but she'd also understood that Alexa deserved better than her parents could provide alone. My wallet sat heavy in my back pocket as I dressed. 3 credit cards maxed out for Harry's emergencies, the urgent transmission repair that turned into a full engine rebuild, Mary's temporary need for grocery money that became a monthly expectation, each request delivered with Harry's shamefaced explanations and Mary's perfectly timed gratitude. Walking to the kitchen for my keys, I passed the refrigerator, where Alexa's latest drawing hung beside my grocery list. She'd drawn our last fishing trip, 2 stick figures by a blue crayon lake, both smiling. "Best day ever, Grandpa," written in purple marker along the bottom. That's when Mary's recent suggestion hit me with fresh clarity. 3 weeks ago, standing in this exact spot, she'd looked around my kitchen and said, "Norman, don't you think this house is getting too big for you? There are lovely assisted living communities where you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance." Harry had quickly changed the subject to Alexa's softball season, but Mary's eyes had lingered on my granite countertops, the expensive appliances Ellen and I had chosen together, the same calculating look she'd worn at the funeral. I grabbed my car keys from the counter, remembering Ellen's last coherent words. "Promise me you'll always take care of Alexa, but watch Harry carefully. He's weak, and weak people make dangerous choices when someone strong is whispering in their ear." At the time, I'd thought she meant his drinking buddies or get-rich-quick schemes. Now, I wondered if Ellen had seen something in Mary that I'd missed. The way she'd started every conversation about money with Alexa's needs, making me feel selfish for questioning the expenses. The garage door opener hummed as morning light streamed across my Mercedes. Ellen's car still sat in her spot, covered and pristine. I'd kept making payments on it for months after her death, unable to admit she was really gone. Maybe that's what they were counting on, my inability to say no when it came to family. The grandfather who'd rather pay than disappoint, who'd rather trust than investigate. But 40 years in construction had taught me to check foundations before building anything important. I backed out of the driveway slowly, watching my house shrink in the rearview mirror. By tonight, after whatever conversation Harry and Mary had planned, I suspected I'd see everything differently. For now, I needed to buy my granddaughter a birthday present, something special, perhaps the last gift I'd give her before everything changed. Northtown Mall buzzed with Saturday morning energy as I parked near the main entrance. 8:15, and already families were streaming toward the toy stores. Perfect timing for Alexa's gifts. The Lego architecture section drew me immediately. Alexa had been fascinated by buildings since her school field trip to the Space Needle last month. The Statue of Liberty set caught my eye, detailed enough to challenge her growing skills, but not overwhelming. $180 seemed reasonable for something that would occupy her curious mind for weeks. "Excellent choice, sir." The young clerk smiled as he rang up my purchase. "My daughter loves this series. Would you like gift wrapping?" "Please. It's for my granddaughter's 8th birthday." Next stop, sporting goods. Alexa had mentioned wanting a real bicycle, not the tiny pink thing she'd outgrown. The Trek model displayed near the window looked perfect. Lightweight frame, handbrakes she could manage, reflective strips for safety. $320, but her delighted face would be worth every penny. Loading the bicycle box into my SUV, I checked my watch. 9:10. Plenty of time for one more stop. Norman! What a lovely surprise. Dorothy Henderson materialized beside my car, clutching a shopping bag from the bookstore. My neighbor of 15 years looked genuinely pleased to see me, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. "Dorothy, good morning. Starting your weekend shopping early?" "Oh, you know me. I like beating the crowds." She gestured toward the mall entrance. "Though I suppose you're here for birthday preparations. Harry mentioned Alexa's party when I saw him last week." "He mentioned it?" I closed the SUV's rear hatch, curious. "Where did you run into him?" "Downtown, actually. Tuesday morning, I think it was. Mary was with him, and they were coming out of First National Bank with quite a stack of papers." Dorothy chuckled, looked very official and serious. Probably refinancing something the way young people do these days. Tuesday. 4 days ago. Harry hadn't mentioned any banking business during his nervous phone call this morning. But then again, why would he? People handled financial matters all the time without broadcasting details. Probably just routine business, I said, shifting my shopping bags to my other hand. Of course, dear. None of my concern, anyway. Dorothy patted my arm affectionately. Well, I'd better let you finish your shopping. Give my love to that sweet granddaughter of yours. She bustled away toward the bookstore, leaving me standing beside my car with a vague sense of unease. Banking business on Tuesday, nervous phone call on Saturday. The timing felt oddly coincidental, but then again, Harry always seemed to be juggling some financial crisis or another. I shook off the feeling and headed toward the florist shop near the mall's east entrance. Mary had always appreciated flowers, and white roses would make a thoughtful gesture for the hostess of Alexa's party. The florist, a middle-aged woman with dirt under her fingernails, wrapped a dozen long-stemmed roses in silver paper with practiced efficiency. "These are beautiful," she said, adjusting the ribbon. "Special occasion?" "My granddaughter's birthday party. They're for her mother." "How thoughtful. She'll love them." $28 for flowers that would wilt in a week, but Mary's pleased expression would be worth the expense. These small gestures mattered in maintaining family harmony, especially when underlying tensions existed. By 9:30, my SUV was loaded with packages that represented nearly $600 of birthday celebration. The Lego set, bicycle, roses, and the card I'd selected, each item chosen with Alexa's happiness in mind. This was what grandfathers did. They spoiled their grandchildren shamelessly and enjoyed every moment of it. Driving home through Saturday morning traffic, I found myself thinking about Dorothy's casual observation. Harry and Mary at the bank with papers, serious expressions. Official business that Harry hadn't bothered mentioning. But then again, married couples handled countless administrative tasks without involving extended family. Insurance updates, mortgage refinancing, college savings accounts for Alexa. Any number of legitimate reasons could explain their downtown visit. Still, as I turned into my driveway, I couldn't quite dismiss the small voice in my head that wondered why Harry had sounded so nervous this morning, if everything was truly as routine as it appeared. After wrapping Alexa's gifts and grabbing a quick lunch, I arrived at Harry's house precisely at 2 o'clock. The front door opened before I could ring the bell. "Norman!" Mary practically sang my name, her arms spreading wide as if we hadn't seen each other in months rather than weeks. "You look absolutely wonderful today." This enthusiasm felt foreign. Mary usually offered a polite smile and quick hug before disappearing into kitchen duties. Today she touched my arm twice while speaking, her eyes bright with an energy I'd never seen directed at me before. "Thank you, Mary. The party looks lovely." I stepped inside, carrying the wrapped bicycle box and gift bag containing the Lego set. Colorful streamers hung from every doorway, and balloon clusters filled each corner. Far more elaborate than previous birthday celebrations. "Dad, there he is!" Harry appeared from the living room, his voice carrying across the house like a carnival barker's. "Come meet Mike from work." "Mike, this is my amazing father I've told you so much about." Amazing father, Harry's workplace conversations about me typically focused on my old-fashioned business methods or retirement stubbornness. But today he clapped my shoulder with theatrical enthusiasm, his laugh echoing too loudly in the decorated hallway. The living room buzzed with familiar faces. The Johnsons from next door chatted near the fireplace, while Mrs. Smith sat carefully on the couch, observing everything with sharp eyes. Carlos and Elena Martinez helped their son Tommy arrange party games on the coffee table. "Grandpa!" Alexa ran toward me, her genuine smile cutting through the artificial atmosphere like sunlight. She wrapped her arms around my waist, and for a moment the world felt normal again. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." I handed her the gift bag. "This one first, then the big surprise." She unwrapped the Lego architecture set with careful fingers, her eyes widening at the Statue of Liberty image on the box. But when she looked up to thank me, something flickered across her face, a shadow of sadness that vanished when Mary approached. "Isn't Grandpa generous, honey? Say thank you properly." "Thank you, Grandpa. It's really cool." Alexa's voice carried genuine appreciation mixed with something else. Guilt? Worry? An 8-year-old shouldn't sound so burdened during her own birthday party. Harry guided me toward the kitchen where Mike Davidson nursed a beer and made small talk about car sales. The conversation flowed normally enough, but Harry kept interjecting with unnecessary compliments about my business wisdom and family leadership. Each comment felt rehearsed, like lines from a script he'd memorized poorly. Norman knows everything about building successful relationships, Harry announced to Mike. He's taught me so much about trust and family loyalty. Trust and family loyalty. Strange topics for a casual party conversation, especially delivered with Harry's current manic intensity. Mike nodded politely, clearly uncomfortable with Harry's excessive praise of his own father. Mary reappeared with a plate of appetizers, positioning herself between me and the other guests. Norman, you simply must try these canapes. I made them especially thinking of your sophisticated tastes. My sophisticated tastes? Mary had never paid attention to my food preferences beyond ensuring adequate quantities appeared at family gatherings. Now she hovered beside me, refilling my wine glass before it emptied, and asking about my comfort level every few minutes. From across the room, I watched Alexa opening cards from school friends. Her movement seemed mechanical, polite, but distant. When Tommy Martinez asked about her new Lego set, she nodded and smiled appropriately. But her responses lacked the genuine excitement I'd expected. She's growing up so fast, Mrs. Smith observed, settling beside me on the couch. Such a thoughtful child. She asked me last week if grandparents and parents ever disagree about important decisions. My wine glass paused halfway to my lips. What did you tell her? That families work through differences with love and honesty. Mrs. Smith studied Alexa with concerned eyes, though she seemed troubled by something beyond normal childhood worries. Across the room, Harry and Mary exchanged a quick glance, the kind of wordless communication that suggested coordination. They'd been doing that all afternoon, I realized. Brief eye contact, subtle nods, perfectly timed interruptions when conversations approached certain topics. The afternoon stretched on with forced merriment and careful choreography. Every smile felt calculated, every laugh slightly too loud, every gesture of family affection performed for an audience. Only Alexa's behavior toward me remained authentic, though shadowed by whatever burden she carried. As the party wound toward its conclusion and guests began gathering their belongings, Harry caught my attention with an overly casual gesture. Dad, stick around after everyone leaves, okay? Mary and I have been looking forward to that family chat we mentioned. The artificial cheerfulness began weighing on me like humidity before a storm. I excused myself with a polite smile. Mentioning the bathroom down the hallway, Mary jumped up immediately, offering directions I didn't need, her concern feeling rehearsed rather than genuine. Walking away from the party noise, I noticed Alexa watching me from beside the gift table. Something in her expression, worry mixed with determination, made me pause. When I reached the hallway lined with family photos, small footsteps followed behind me. Grandpa? Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I turned to find her glancing back toward the living room, ensuring we were alone. The birthday girl, who should have been glowing with excitement, looked instead like she carried the weight of the world on 8-year-old shoulders. What is it, sweetheart? I knelt to her eye level, recognizing the serious expression she'd inherited from Ellen. You look troubled. She bit her lower lip, a gesture that reminded me painfully of her grandmother during difficult conversations. I need to tell you something important about Mom and Dad. My chest tightened. What about them, honey? They're planning to take your money tonight. The words tumbled out in a rush, as if she'd been rehearsing them. After everyone goes home, I heard them talking last night when I was supposed to be sleeping. The hallway seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself, fighting to keep my expression calm for her sake. What exactly did you hear? Mom said you have too much money for an old man living alone. Alexa's voice dropped even lower. She told Dad they were going to fix that problem tonight. Dad seemed scared, but Mom said the papers from the bank would make everything legal. Papers from the bank. Tuesday's visit that Dorothy Henderson had mentioned suddenly made terrible sense. My business instincts, dormant for years, roared back to life with crystalline clarity. Did they say anything else? I asked gently, though my mind raced with implications I hoped an 8-year-old couldn't understand. Dad kept saying, "What if he finds out?" And Mom said it would be too late by then. Tears welled in her eyes. "Grandpa, I don't want them to take your money." "You're the only one who really listens to me." I pulled her into a fierce hug, feeling her small body trembling against mine. Ellen's granddaughter, carrying adult secrets that no child should bear. The betrayal cut deeper, knowing they'd planned this within earshot of innocent ears. "Listen to me carefully," I whispered into her hair. "You did the right thing telling me. But we need to keep this our secret for now, okay? Can you do that?" She nodded against my shoulder. "Are you going to stop them?" "Yes, sweetheart. I'm going to handle everything." I held her at arm's length, making sure she could see the certainty in my eyes. "But we need to go back to your party now and act normal. Can you be brave for me?" "I think so." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "Will you still love me if Mom and Dad get mad?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "Alexa, nothing your parents do could ever change how much I love you. Nothing. Do you understand?" Relief flooded her face, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her all afternoon. "I love you too, Grandpa." Hand in hand, we walked back toward the party sounds. But everything had changed in those few whispered minutes. The son I'd raised, the daughter-in-law I'd supported, the family I'd trusted with my heart. All of it now viewed through the lens of calculated betrayal. As we rejoined the celebration, I caught Harry's eyes across the room. He smiled and waved, the same false enthusiasm that had puzzled me earlier. Now I understood exactly what that performance was designed to accomplish. Returning to the party felt like walking onto a stage where everyone else had forgotten they were acting. I settled back into conversations with the natural ease that 40 years of business negotiations had taught me, while internally cataloging every glance between Harry and Mary with devastating new clarity. Mrs. Smith was discussing her garden when I noticed Harry checking his watch for the third time in 10 minutes. Mary appeared beside him immediately, their brief eye contact now obviously coordinated rather than coincidental. They were managing me, I realized, ensuring I stayed comfortable, engaged, and most importantly, present for whatever they had planned after the guests departed. "Norman, how about some more wine?" Mary's hand touched my arm with practiced concern. "You look a bit pale. Are you feeling all right?" Pale. Yes, I probably was. Learning that your family planned to steal your life's work might do that to a person. But I managed a tired smile that wasn't entirely manufactured, just a slight headache. But I'm fine. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the kind of micro-expression I'd learned to read in boardroom adversaries. Relief mixed with calculation. A tired, slightly unwell grandfather would be easier to manipulate than an alert one. For the next hour, I played my part perfectly. Gracious grandfather, generous family patriarch, aging man perhaps not quite as sharp as he once was. I accepted their attentions, praised their hospitality, and observed their increasingly obvious coordination with the detached interest of studying a chess opponent's strategy. Harry kept steering conversations away from financial topics, whenever guests mentioned the economy or retirement planning. Mary redirected discussions about my house, my health, my future living arrangements. They were managing information flow, ensuring nothing conflicted with whatever narrative they'd constructed for tonight's important family discussion. Around 5:30, as afternoon shadows lengthened and guests began collecting their belongings, I announced my intention to leave. I think I should head home early. This headache isn't improving. The effect was immediate. Harry and Mary exchanged a look of genuine alarm. "Dad, wait!" Harry moved to block my path to the door. "We really wanted to talk about those important family matters we mentioned. Remember? You promised to stay after everyone left." "Perhaps another time," I said, maintaining the weary grandfather persona. "I really need to rest." "But Norman," Mary stepped closer, her voice taking on urgent undertones, "we have something special planned for tonight, something we've been preparing for weeks." Something they'd been preparing for weeks. The bank visit Dorothy Henderson witnessed. Legal documents, plans that required my presence and cooperation. I could see the desperation creeping into their performance as their carefully orchestrated timeline threatened to collapse. "I'm sure it can wait until tomorrow," I replied gently. Family isn't going anywhere. Harry's face flushed. Actually, Dad, there are some time-sensitive issues we need to discuss. Financial matters. That can't wait. Financial matters that can't wait. How interesting that Harry would phrase it exactly that way. I filed the comment away with all the other intelligence I'd gathered throughout this surreal afternoon. Tomorrow, son, I promise. I turned toward Alexa, who had been watching our exchange with worried eyes. Kneeling to her level, I pulled her into what might be our last innocent embrace before everything changed. Thank you for the most wonderful birthday party, sweetheart. Thank you for my presents, Grandpa. Her small arms tightened around my neck. I love you so much. I love you too, more than you'll ever know. I whispered against her ear, quiet enough that only she could hear. Everything will be okay. Standing, I felt Harry's hand on my shoulder, heavier than necessary, almost restraining. Dad, please, just give us an hour. 1 hour to discuss these important family decisions. I looked into my son's eyes and saw not the boy I'd raised, but a desperate man whose greed had overwhelmed whatever love remained. The realization cut deeper than I'd expected, but my voice remained steady. Another time, Harry. I need to go home now. Walking to my car while they watched from the doorway, Mary whispering urgently in Harry's ear, both of them radiating frustrated tension, I felt the weight of performance finally lifting from my shoulders. Alone in my Mercedes, I sat for a moment in their driveway, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. My family had planned to rob me. Tonight, with legal documents and careful preparation. Starting the engine, I pulled away from the house where I had celebrated what might be my last normal family gathering. Inside my house, the silence felt different than it had that morning. No longer peaceful, pregnant with purpose. I walked directly to my home office, the room where I'd built my construction business from a single truck and stubborn determination. 40 years of important documents lived in the wall, safe behind Ellen's portrait, as I spun the combination lock. Muscle memory from decades of business dealings guided my fingers. 1959, Ellen's birthday. The irony wasn't lost on me that her memory would help me protect what we'd built together. The documents told a story I'd been too trusting to read properly. Bank statements revealing the pattern of financial requests that had escalated from hundreds to thousands over 3 years. Investment portfolios worth far more than Harry or Mary realized. Property deeds for rental properties they didn't know existed, and most importantly, records of every payment I'd made to support their lifestyle. 247 individual transactions. I documented everything with the methodical precision that had made my business successful. Mortgage payments, car repairs, medical bills, private school tuition for Alexa. Each payment justified by some family emergency or opportunity that seemed reasonable at the time. Sitting at my desk with Ellen's photo watching from the bookshelf, I finally saw the manipulation clearly. The escalating requests had been conditioning, training me to say yes to increasingly larger amounts. Mary's suggestions about assisted living weren't concern for my welfare. They were reconnaissance for tonight's planned theft. Every mortgage payment, every tuition check, I said aloud to Ellen's photograph. They've been planning this for months. My phone sat silent on the desk. Harry and Mary would be scrambling right now, trying to figure out how to proceed without me present for their important family discussion. The thought gave me a grim satisfaction. Opening my business card file, I found James Miller's personal number. 20 years of friendship and professional respect with the vice president of First National Bank. James would remember the careful, detail-oriented contractor who'd never missed a payment or broken a promise. More importantly, he'd understand exactly what legal documents obtained under false pretenses actually meant. The clock showed 9:30 p.m., too late for business calls, but I made a note for tomorrow morning. First priority, understanding exactly what papers Harry and Mary had obtained and how to neutralize their legal effectiveness. Next, I reviewed my will and trust documents, standard arrangements that left everything to Harry, with provisions for Alexa's education and future. Written when I still believed my son possessed integrity and love for his family, rather than simply greed for our money. Those documents would need immediate revision. Catherine Davis had notarized most of my legal paperwork over the years, independent, discreet, and unconnected to any bank where Harry and Mary might have allies. Another call for tomorrow morning. Spreading the investment statements across my desk like battle plans, I calculated my actual net worth for the first time in years. 2.3 million in liquid assets, plus 3 rental properties, plus this house with no mortgage. Far more than Harry and Mary suspected, and certainly more than they could steal in one evening's legal maneuvering. But this wasn't about money. This was about justice for an 8-year-old girl whose parents were willing to traumatize her with adult secrets. This was about punishment for adults who'd exploit an elderly man's love for his family. This was about ensuring that betrayal came with consequences. Ellen's voice echoed from our last conversation. Watch Harry carefully. Weak people make dangerous choices when someone strong is whispering in their ear. Now I understood. Mary had been whispering for 3 years, and Harry had chosen greed over family loyalty at every turn. My phone rang suddenly, jarring me from planning. Harry's name appeared on the caller ID. I let it ring. Sunday morning brought clarity that a restless night had failed to provide. After finally falling asleep near dawn, I woke with my businessman's instincts fully engaged and a specific plan forming. Over coffee in my home office, I opened my business contact file to James Miller's personal number. 9 o'clock seemed appropriate for calling an old friend about financial matters. James and I had maintained our friendship through 20 years of loans, investments, and the gradual success of price construction. He'd trust a call from me, especially about portfolio management. James, sorry to bother you on Sunday morning, I began when he answered. I've been reviewing my investment portfolio and wanted to get your thoughts on some consolidation ideas. Norman, always good to hear from you. His voice carried genuine warmth. What's on your mind? I'm considering simplifying my accounts, maybe centralizing everything for easier management. What are current banking policies on financial assistance programs? Well, there are several options depending on your needs. Are you thinking about automated services or more comprehensive management assistance? Perfect opening. Actually, I've been wondering about power of attorney arrangements, conservatorship options. Had any clients dealing with those recently? James paused, and I could almost hear him considering confidentiality boundaries. Funny you should ask. Just last week, I had a couple inquiring about guardianship procedures for an elderly family member. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. Oh? Complex process, I imagine. Actually, they seemed quite prepared. Had done considerable research on conservatorship requirements, documentation timelines. Very thorough people. Very thorough. My son and daughter-in-law had researched exactly how to steal my independence with legal precision. That's thoughtful of them to help their family. They were asking specific questions about mental competency evaluations, financial management documentation, timelines for court approval. James's professional knowledge was exactly what I needed. They understood the terminology better than most attorneys I've worked with. Mental competency evaluations, court approval timelines. They'd planned to have me declared incompetent and seize control of everything I'd spent 40 years building. The scope of their betrayal kept expanding beyond what I'd imagined possible. Did they seem confident about their situation? I asked carefully. Absolutely. They mentioned having documentation ready, medical opinions prepared, said they expected the process to move quickly once initiated. James chuckled. Most families aren't nearly so organized when dealing with elderly care transitions. Elderly care transitions. The euphemism made my hands clench around the phone. They'd researched how to institutionalize me while stealing my wealth, and they'd done it with systematic, professional thoroughness. Sounds like they really cared about their family members' welfare, I managed. That's what struck me most. How much preparation they'd put into ensuring everything would be legally proper and swift. They asked about expedited processes, emergency conservatorship procedures, emergency conservatorship, for situations where immediate action was necessary to protect someone's assets from their own incompetence. Hearing my own situation described in clinical banking terms felt surreal. Well, I appreciate the information, James. Gives me a better sense of available options. Anytime, Norman. Though honestly, you seem sharper than men half your age. Can't imagine you needing that kind of assistance for decades yet. If only he knew how close I'd come to needing it yesterday. Let's hope you're right. Thanks for taking my call on Sunday. Always a pleasure. Let me know if you want to schedule a formal consultation about your portfolio. After hanging up, I sat staring at my notes from the conversation. Mental competency evaluations, documentation ready, medical opinions prepared, emergency procedures. Harry and Mary hadn't just planned to rob me. They'd engineered a complete legal framework to justify stealing my life. The phone rang suddenly, startling me from my thoughts. Harry's name appeared on the caller ID again. This time, I answered. Hello? I answered the phone with deliberate weariness, as if the effort of reaching across my desk required considerable energy. Dad, thank goodness. I was worried sick about you leaving early yesterday. Harry's voice carried what sounded like genuine concern, though I now recognized the calculation beneath it. Are you feeling all right? Oh, Harry. I let my voice trail off slightly, as if gathering thoughts had become difficult. I've been having these terrible headaches. Hard to concentrate on anything. That doesn't sound good. Maybe we should have you checked by a doctor. Mary and I could drive you to the clinic this afternoon. Perfect. They were accelerating their timeline, exactly as I'd hoped after disrupting their original plan. That's very thoughtful of you both. I've been feeling so confused lately. Don't worry, Dad. We'll take care of everything. We'll be over in about an hour, okay? After hanging up, I spent 30 minutes preparing for the performance of my life. I mussed my hair slightly, put on an old cardigan that made me look frailer, and practiced the slower, more hesitant movements of genuine elderly confusion. When their car pulled into my driveway, I was ready. Norman, we brought some papers that might help with your situation, Mary announced as they settled into my living room. She'd brought a leather portfolio that looked expensive and professional, the kind lawyers used for important documents. Papers? I blinked at her with what I hoped appeared to be genuine bewilderment. What kind of papers? Harry leaned forward, his expression earnest. Dad, we've been researching ways to help you manage things better. Your finances, medical decisions, that sort of thing. Manage? I'm not sure I understand. I rubbed my temples as if the conversation was causing physical pain. Everything seems so complicated these days. Mary opened the portfolio with practiced efficiency. These documents would give us power of attorney to help with your banking, bills, medical appointments. Think of it as having a backup system. The forms looked professionally prepared, with highlighted sections marked for my signature. Someone had invested serious money in legal consultation for this theft. I stared at the papers as if they contained hieroglyphics. It's all so overwhelming, I murmured. I used to understand these things better. That's exactly why we need to do this now. Mary pressed gently. Before things get more confusing for you. Harry shifted uncomfortably. Dad, are you sure you're okay? You seem really different today. I looked at him with what I hoped was confused gratitude. Different? I don't feel different, just tired all the time. These headaches make it hard to think clearly. Mary and Harry exchanged a glance, the same coordinated communication I'd noticed at the party, but now I understood its purpose. They were evaluating whether I was impaired enough to sign documents without fully understanding their implications. Norman, these papers would just make it easier for us to help you. Mary continued, you wouldn't have to worry about managing everything alone. I suppose that would be nice, I said slowly, picking up one of the documents with trembling hands. But this is such a big decision. My head is pounding, trying to think it through. Of course it's a big decision, Harry said quickly. Take your time. Mary's patience looked more strained, though don't you think it would be easier with family help? You trust us, don't you? Of course I trust you. You're family. I set the papers down carefully. But could I maybe sleep on it? Decide tomorrow when I'm thinking clearer? These headaches make everything so fuzzy. Harry and Mary looked at each other again, and I could see Mary's frustration barely contained beneath her caring facade. Sure, Dad. We'll come by tomorrow morning, and you can sign them then. After they left, I allowed myself to slump in my chair, dropping the performance for the first time in hours. The documents they'd left behind told the complete story. Power of attorney forms that would give them control over my finances, medical decisions, and living arrangements. Everything James had warned me about, laid out in legal language, designed to steal my life. 3 hours later, I sat in my home office reviewing my notes from Harry and Mary's visit. Like a general planning a campaign, their power of attorney documents lay spread across my desk. Professional forms that would have given them complete control over my finances, medical decisions, and living arrangements. Every signature line highlighted in yellow, every witness requirement meticulously marked. They'd done their homework. But they'd forgotten I'd spent 40 years doing mine. Catherine Davis answered on the second ring. Norman, good evening. What can I do for you? Catherine, I need notary services tomorrow morning for some family financial documents. Could you come to my house around 10 o'clock? Of course. What type of documents are we dealing with? I chose my words carefully. Power of attorney forms. It might be a somewhat sensitive family matter, so I'd appreciate your professional discretion. You know you can count on that. I'll bring my seal and journal. Perfect. Catherine had notarized dozens of contracts for my construction business over the years. She'd recognize irregular pressure tactics or coercion immediately. It was part of her professional training. Next call, James Miller. James, could you stop by tomorrow morning around 10? I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I'd like to review my portfolio in detail. Certainly, Norman. After what we discussed about financial management assistance, I think a thorough review would be wise. Excellent. It might be educational. James chuckled. I'll bring the necessary paperwork. See you at 10? Educational indeed. James would witness whatever Harry and Mary planned to do, and as a bank vice president, he'd understand exactly what he was seeing. More importantly, his presence would add legal weight to any documentation of their behavior. Final call, Harry. I let my voice carry the tremulous uncertainty I'd performed that afternoon. Harry, I've been thinking about those papers you brought. You were right. I do need help managing things. Dad, that's wonderful. Mary will be so relieved. We can come over first thing tomorrow morning. I've arranged for a notary to make everything proper and legal. 10 o'clock sharp. Perfect. And Dad, thank you for trusting us with this. Trust. The word sat bitter in my mouth, but I managed to sound grateful. You're my family. Of course I trust you. After hanging up, I walked to the window overlooking my backyard. Ellen's rose garden needed attention, another task I'd been managing alone since her death. Tomorrow would determine whether I'd continue managing it as a free man or watch it wither from some assisted living facility while Harry and Mary divided our life's work. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and wrote down the sequence of events I expected tomorrow. 9:45 a.m. Catherine arrives, sets up notary materials. 10 a.m. James arrives with portfolio documents. 10:05 a.m. Harry and Mary arrive, expecting easy document signing. 10 a.m. Professional witnesses observe their manipulation tactics. 10:15 a.m. Truth emerges. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. They'd researched how to steal my independence through legal procedures, but they'd forgotten that legal procedures require proper witnesses and documentation. Tomorrow, those same requirements would expose their betrayal. 20 miles across town, Harry was probably explaining to Mary how cooperative I'd sounded, how the notary would make everything official, how close they were to controlling millions of dollars. They'd celebrate tonight, confident that a confused old man had finally accepted their help. They had no idea they were walking into a trap set by the same business mind that had built what they were trying to steal. I looked at Alexa's drawing on my refrigerator, our stick figure family standing beside a crooked house. Tomorrow would determine whether that little girl grew up with grandparents who protected her or parents who taught her that family loyalty could be bought and sold. Ellen's voice echoed from 3 years ago. Promise me you'll always take care of Alexa. I intended to keep that promise. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. I slept little that night, but when Catherine arrived at 9:45 with her notary seal and journal, I felt completely prepared. Good morning, Norman. Beautiful home office, she said, arranging her materials on the side table. This should be straightforward. James knocked precisely at 10, carrying his banker's portfolio. Morning, Norman. Ready for that portfolio review? More ready than you know, I replied, positioning myself behind my desk as footsteps approached the front door. Harry and Mary entered with confident smiles and their leather document case. They paused when they saw Catherine and James, but Mary recovered quickly. "How thoughtful of you to arrange professional assistance," she said smoothly. "This will make everything so much more official." "Indeed it will," I replied, my voice carrying none of yesterday's confused frailty. "Please, everyone take a seat." Harry settled into the chair across from my desk, still smiling. "Dad, you sound much better today. More like your old self." Exactly like my old self. Sharp, observant, capable. I leaned forward, meeting his eyes directly, which is why I need to tell you something before we sign any documents. Mary's pen stopped moving across her checklist. "Norman, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong with me, Mary, but I'm completely aware of your plan." The silence stretched like a taut wire. Harry's smile faltered. "Dad, what plan? We're here to help you." "I know about your visit to James's bank last Tuesday. I know about the guardianship procedures you researched. I know about the mental competency evaluations you plan to arrange." Harry's face drained of color. Mary's carefully controlled expression cracked for just a moment before she attempted damage control. "Norman, you're confused. We visited the bank about our own financial planning." "James," I interrupted, turning to my friend, "would you mind sharing what they discussed during their Tuesday afternoon appointment?" James cleared his throat professionally. "They asked detailed questions about conservatorship procedures, documentation requirements for declaring someone mentally incompetent, and expedited court processes for emergency financial management." Catherine looked up from her notary journal, suddenly alert. "Mr. Price, are you saying these power of attorney documents were prepared under false pretenses?" "I'm saying they planned to have me declared incompetent so they could steal everything I've worked 40 years to build." Harry found his voice, though it came out strangled. "Dad, we were worried about you. Yesterday you seemed so confused. Yesterday I was performing. Today you're seeing who I really am." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the documentation I'd prepared. 247 transactions over 3 years, $70,000 in support payments, every mortgage payment, every car repair, every private school tuition bill, all documented. Mary leaned forward, desperation creeping into her voice. Those were legitimate family expenses. Conditioning payments, training me to say yes to increasingly larger amounts until I'd agreed to sign away my independence. I looked directly at her. "You researched exactly how to have me institutionalized while you divided my assets." Catherine set down her pen. "This is highly irregular. I need to understand the full situation before notarizing anything." "The full situation," I continued, "is that my son and daughter-in-law spent weeks researching legal procedures to steal my money, consulted with lawyers about guardianship processes, and planned to have me declared mentally incompetent based on fabricated evidence of confusion." Harry's hands shook as he gripped the armrests of his chair. We just thought you might need help managing things." "Help managing a net worth of $2.3 million plus 3 rental properties?" My voice hardened. "Help that required consulting attorneys about emergency conservatorship procedures." Mary stood abruptly. "You're twisting everything. We love you." "Love doesn't involve conspiracy, Mary. Love doesn't involve researching how to steal someone's independence while they're still healthy and competent." James spoke quietly. "Norman, the questions they asked were very specific. They knew legal terminology that most families never encounter unless they're planning something significant." Catherine nodded grimly. "In my experience, legitimate family financial planning doesn't require research into mental competency evaluations." The room fell silent except for Harry's labored breathing. He looked at me with something approaching recognition, perhaps seeing for the first time the businessman who'd built the wealth they'd tried to steal. "What happens now?" he whispered. I stood feeling every year of my age, but also every ounce of my accumulated wisdom and experience. "Now we discuss consequences." "Consequences," I repeated, opening my desk drawer to retrieve the legal documents I'd prepared over the weekend. "I'm changing my will immediately. My estate will go into an educational trust for Alexa, accessible when she turns 21. Harry leaned forward desperately. "Dad, please. We made mistakes, but we can fix this. The trust will provide for her college education, graduate school if she chooses, and startup funds for whatever career path she selects." I spread the new will documents across my desk. "Catherine, I need these witnessed and notarized." Mary's voice cracked slightly. Norman, you can't do this to your own family. I'm protecting my family, I replied firmly, from parents who were willing to steal her grandfather's independence to fund their lifestyle. Catherine examined the documents professionally. Mr. Price, these terms are quite specific. There are conditions attached. If Harry and Mary formally renounce all claims to my estate and demonstrate genuine change over the next year, I'll reconsider. But they must prove they've become the parents Alexa deserves. James nodded approvingly as he witnessed my signature. The educational trust structure is excellent. She'll have every opportunity you never got to provide directly. Harry buried his face in his hands. What does genuine change mean? How do we prove that? By getting jobs that actually support your family instead of depending on me. By prioritizing Alexa's happiness over your own financial desires. By showing me that my granddaughter matters more to you than my bank account. Mary stood abruptly, her composure finally cracking completely. How are we supposed to live without your support? The same way millions of other families do, through honest work and responsible spending. The mortgage assistance ends today. The car payments stop immediately. You're both adults with college degrees. Figure it out. Catherine finished notarizing the documents with practiced efficiency. Everything is legally binding now. Mr. Price, you should keep these in a secure location. My attorney will have copies by this afternoon, I assured her. After Catherine and James departed with handshakes and promises of discretion, the three of us sat in uncomfortable silence. Harry looked broken. Mary appeared to be calculating survival strategies. Is there anything else you want to say? I asked. Harry met my eyes for the first time since the revelation began. I'm sorry, Dad. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm genuinely sorry. Mary said nothing, which told me everything about her priorities. Words are cheap, Harry. Actions over the next year will determine whether this family has a future together. 3 hours later, Alexa knocked on my door, her school backpack still slung over her shoulder. Grandpa? Mommy said you wanted to see me. I knelt to her eye level, just as I had in the hallway 2 days ago. Come sit with me, sweetheart. We need to talk about some grown-up things. She settled beside me on the couch, her 8-year-old wisdom already sensing something serious. Is this about what I told you? Partly. Your mommy and daddy made some bad choices about money, and there have to be consequences. But none of this changes how much I love you. Are they in trouble? They have to learn to take better care of themselves and you. But Alexa, I want you to know that your future is completely safe. I've made special arrangements to make sure you can go to any college you want, study anything that interests you. Her eyes brightened slightly. Even veterinary school? That's really expensive. Especially veterinary school. And if you change your mind and want to be an engineer or a teacher or start your own business, there will be money for that too. What about Mommy and Daddy? They're going to work very hard to become better parents. And if they succeed, our family might be able to heal from this hurt. But even if they don't, you and I will always have each other. She hugged me tightly, and I felt Ellen's presence in that embrace. 3 generations of love continuing despite betrayal and broken trust. Can we look at college brochures? Alexa asked. I want to see what veterinary schools look like. Absolutely, I smiled, reaching for my laptop. We have all the time in the world to plan your future. Outside, spring was turning to summer, and Ellen's roses were finally beginning to bloom. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching. While I was fighting for my life in intensive care, my family was basking in Hawaii, spending my last savings. So I decided to take action. When they returned, they found something near the house that made them call me 73 times. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. My eyes snapped open to blinding white light. Panic hit first. Where was I? Sharp tubes scraped my throat. Wires clung to my chest like spider webs. I tried to sit up, but my body felt like it belonged to someone else. The room spun. Machines beeped frantically around me. This wasn't my bedroom in the mountains. This was sterile, cold, wrong. I reached for my throat, desperate to remove whatever was choking me, but my arms barely responded. Help, I tried to say, but only a wheeze escaped. Footsteps rushed toward me. A woman in scrubs appeared at my bedside, her face calm but alert. Behind her, more medical staff crowded into the small space. "Mr. Warren, you're safe," she said, her voice steady. "I'm Dr. Green. Please don't try to remove the oxygen tube." Safe? I wasn't safe. I was trapped in this mechanical nightmare, and I couldn't remember how I'd gotten here. Where am I? What happened to me? My voice came out as barely a whisper. "Mr. Warren, you're in the hospital. You had a heart attack 10 days ago. Please stay calm. The worst is behind you." 10 days. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. 10 days of my life gone. I stared at Dr. Green, searching her face for lies, but found only professional concern. 10 days? Where is my son Dennis? Why isn't he here? Dr. Green's expression shifted slightly. Something flickered in her eyes. Hesitation, maybe discomfort. "Regarding your family. I haven't seen them in recent days. Right now, it's important that you rest." Rest? How could I rest when my son wasn't here? Dennis lived just 20 minutes away. Even if work kept him busy, surely he'd visit his father in the ICU. Unless something had happened to him, too. The machines around my bed continued their electronic symphony. Through the window, I could see snow-capped peaks in the distance. The familiar silhouette of the Colorado Rockies. At least I was still in Evergreen. Dr. Green checked the monitors, making notes on a tablet. Her movements were efficient, practiced. How many patients like me had she seen? How many confused old men waking up from medical nightmares? "Your heart rhythm is strong," she said, looking back at me. "Your body went through significant trauma, but you're responding well to treatment." I tried to process this information. A heart attack. At 67, I'd always prided myself on my health. 40 years in the mines had kept me strong, and retirement hadn't slowed me down much. But apparently my body had other plans. "I need to call Dennis," I said. "Your personal effects are in the hospital safe. Once you're a bit stronger, we can arrange for you to use your phone." Personal effects. Like I was already dead. The thought chilled me more than the hospital air conditioning. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical tests and careful monitoring. Nurses came and went, checking my vitals, adjusting medications. Each time someone entered the room, I hoped it might be Dennis. Each time, disappointment settled deeper in my chest. By afternoon, the initial panic had faded, replaced by a different kind of anxiety. Where was my family? Dr. Green's evasive answer troubled me. In all my years, Dennis had never been the type to abandon responsibility. Even as a kid, he'd been reliable, dutiful. Maybe he didn't know about the heart attack. Maybe the hospital hadn't been able to reach him. That had to be it. I watched the mountain shadows lengthen through my window as evening approached. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I'd insist on getting my phone back. I'd call Dennis myself, clear up this misunderstanding. The nursing staff prepared me for sleep, dimming the lights and reducing the constant chatter of medical equipment. But sleep felt impossible. 10 days. I'd lost 10 days of my life, and my son was nowhere to be found. Something wasn't right. 5 days had transformed me from an invalid into something resembling a human being again. I could sit up without the world spinning. My voice had returned to its normal, gravelly tone, instead of the whispered rasp that had embarrassed me earlier. Dr. Green entered for her afternoon rounds, tablet in hand, wearing the same professional smile that had greeted me every day since I'd awakened. "How are we feeling today, Mr. Warren?" "Much better," I said, and meant it. The fog in my brain had lifted. My hands were steady. Even my appetite had returned, though hospital food left much to be desired. She went through her routine examination, checking my pulse, listening to my heart, reviewing the monitors that had become my constant companions. Her expressions remained neutral, but I'd learned to read the subtle signs of satisfaction in her movements. "Your indicators have improved significantly, Mr. Warren. Your heart is recovering well. I think we can discharge you in 2 or 3 days." Relief flooded through me. Home, my own bed, my own kitchen, my familiar surroundings in the mountain house I'd shared with Martha for 35 years. "That's wonderful news, Doctor. What about my phone? I need to contact my son." "Here it is. The nurse brought it from your personal effects. You can use it now, but don't overexert yourself." She handed me the device a simple smartphone that Dennis had insisted I get last Christmas. At the time, I'd grumbled about unnecessary technology, but now it felt like a lifeline to the world I'd been cut off from for 15 days. The screen lit up at my touch. Battery at 12%, but functional. The notification icons showed missed calls and messages, but I didn't want to check them in front of Dr. Green. This conversation with Dennis needed to be private. "Thank you," I said, clutching the phone carefully. "You've taken excellent care of me." "That's what we're here for. Your recovery has been remarkable for someone your age. Keep taking your medications as prescribed. Follow up with your cardiologist next week and avoid any strenuous activity." She made a few more notes, then gathered her materials to leave. "Dr. Green," I called as she reached the door, "has anyone called about me? Asked about my condition?" Her pause lasted just long enough to confirm what I'd suspected. Hospital policy requires us to contact emergency contacts, but we respect patient privacy regarding visitor information. Diplomatic non-answer, professional deflection, but her meaning was clear enough. After she left, I stared at the phone in my hands. 15 days without speaking to my son. In all his 38 years, we'd never gone that long without contact. Even when he'd moved to Denver for college, he'd called every weekend. The weight of the phone seemed to increase as afternoon faded toward evening. Part of me wanted to dial immediately, to hear Dennis's voice and end this mystery, but another part hesitated, afraid of what I might learn. Through my window, the mountains caught the last rays of sunlight, painting the peaks in shades of gold and pink. Soon visiting hours would begin. Maybe Dennis would surprise me, walking through that door with an explanation for his absence. Hours passed. No visitors came. By evening, I'd made my decision. I'd waited long enough. Whatever had kept Dennis away, we'd work through it together. That's what families did. I settled back into my pillows, phone charged and ready. Tonight, after the hospital quieted down, I'd call my son. The hospital had settled into its nighttime rhythm. Hallway lights dimmed to a soft glow. Nursing stations buzzed with quiet activity. I'd been rehearsing this conversation for hours, imagining Dennis's relief at hearing my voice, his explanations for the long absence. My hands trembled slightly as I selected his number from my contacts. 15 days, the longest we'd ever gone without speaking. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, his familiar voice answered, "Dad?" Joy flooded through me at that single word. He was safe, alive, available. "Dennis, finally!" "Where are you, son? I haven't had contact with you for 15 days. Why didn't you visit the hospital?" My excitement made the words tumble together. I wanted to tell him everything, the fear, the confusion, the medical staff who'd taken such good care of me. "Listen, Dad, I can't talk long right now. Pris and I are in Hawaii. I took some money from your stash in the basement for tickets. You understand, we needed a vacation." The words hit me like physical blows. Hawaii. Vacation. My money. "What? Hawaii? 15 days ago I was dying in the ICU and you were flying off on vacation." Background sounds filtered through the phone connection, ocean waves, distant music, the carefree atmosphere of a tropical resort. While I'd been fighting for my life, attached to machines, wondering if I'd survive another day. "Don't be so dramatic, Dad. You can see you're alive. Listen, international calls are expensive here. We'll talk when we get back in a week." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, unable to process what had just happened. The cheerful sounds of Hawaii still echoed in my memory, D waves lapping against beaches while I'd struggled to breathe through tubes. My money. He'd stolen my money. The emergency fund I'd kept in the basement, saved from decades of mine work, set aside for real emergencies, medical bills, home repairs, end-of-life expenses, money I'd planned to leave him someday when I no longer needed it. He'd taken it for a vacation, while his father lay unconscious in intensive care. The phone trembled in my grip. 15 days of wondering where he was, if something terrible had happened to him. 15 days of nurses asking about family, doctors making gentle inquiries about visitors, the embarrassment of being the patient nobody came to see. All while Dennis sipped tropical drinks, and his wife posted Instagram photos from paradise. My heart monitor began beeping faster, responding to the surge of emotions I couldn't control. Betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I'd endured. This wasn't the son I'd raised, the boy who'd helped me through Martha's cancer, who'd called every weekend from college. This was a stranger who'd stolen from his dying father. The mountains outside my window looked different now, darker, more forbidding. The familiar peaks that had comforted me for 67 years now seemed like prison walls, trapping me with this horrible knowledge. Dennis would return in a week, expecting everything to be normal, expecting his father to understand, to forgive, to pretend that 15 days of abandonment during a medical emergency was acceptable behavior. But something had changed in me during that phone call. Something fundamental had shifted, like tectonic plates beneath the mountains. I wasn't the same man who'd collapsed with a heart attack 15 days ago. The dial tone droned in my ear long after Dennis had hung up. I held the phone against my chest, feeling my heart pound against the plastic case. The machines around me continued their electronic symphony, but everything else had gone silent. 15 days. 15 days I fought for my life, and he didn't even call to find out if I was alive. Instead, he went into my stash and flew off to have fun. I set the phone on the bedside table with shaking hands. The hospital room felt smaller now, the walls pressing closer. Through the window, Evergreen's mountain peaks stood like silent sentinels against the star-filled sky. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard ocean waves in the background of Dennis's voice, casual, dismissive, like talking to an inconvenience, rather than the father who'd raised him alone after Martha died. The night stretched endlessly. Nurses made their rounds, checking monitors, adjusting IV drips. I pretended to sleep, but my mind was racing through 30 years of memories. 30 years I've been pulling him out of trouble. When he got fired from the auto dealership, I paid 3 months of his mortgage. When he drank away his Christmas bonus, I gave him money for utilities so Pris wouldn't leave him. Every crisis, every mistake, every poor decision, I'd enabled it all. The pattern was so clear now. Dennis would call with a sob story, I'd write a check, and he'd disappear until the next crisis. Martha used to warn me about it before she passed. "You're making him weak, Percy," she'd say. "A man needs to face consequences." But I hadn't listened. I'd kept rescuing him, kept believing he'd eventually grow up and become responsible. Now I understood the truth. He saw me as an ATM, a backup plan, someone who'd always be there to clean up his messes while he lived his carefree life. Well, no more. The anger built slowly through the night, transforming from hurt into something colder, more calculating. By the time dawn light began filtering through the mountain peaks, I'd made my decision. No, enough being a fool. If he wants to play adult games, he'll get adult consequences. A nurse entered for the morning shift change, checking my vital signs with practiced efficiency. "How are we feeling today, Mr. Warren?" "Ready to go home," I said, and I was. Not to the same home Dennis expected to find when he returned from his stolen vacation. Not to the same father who'd always been there to bail him out. I was ready to teach my son what real consequences looked like. Dr. Green's final examination confirmed what I already knew. My body had healed enough to function outside these sterile walls. The discharge paperwork felt symbolic as I signed each page with steady hands. "Remember, Mr. Warren, no strenuous activity for at least 2 weeks. Take your medications exactly as prescribed, and call immediately if you experience chest pain or shortness of breath." I nodded, pocketing the pill bottles and instruction sheets. My few personal belongings fit in a small bag. Wallet, phone, the clothes I'd worn 17 days ago when the ambulance brought me here. The taxi ride through Evergreen's familiar streets felt surreal. Everything looked exactly the same, but I was seeing it through different eyes. The mountains, the pine forests, the small-town charm. It all belonged to a life I'd lived before. I understood what my own son thought of me. 20 minutes later, we pulled into the driveway of 2847 Maple Grove, the house I'd shared with Martha, where I'd raised Dennis, where I'd planned to spend my remaining years in peace. The key still worked. The front door swung open to silence. Inside, evidence of their hasty departure scattered throughout the rooms. Dirty dishes in the sink. Pris's makeup scattered across the bathroom counter. Dennis's work clothes draped over the bedroom chair. They'd left in a hurry, eager to catch their flight to paradise. The basement stairs creaked under my weight as I descended to check the damage. Behind the water heater where I'd kept my emergency fund for 15 years, the loose floorboard had been pried up carelessly. The metal box that had contained $8,000 in cash lay empty, tossed aside like garbage. $8,000. My backup plan for medical emergencies, home repairs, funeral expenses, gone. But as I stood in that violated basement, something unexpected happened. Instead of despair, I felt relief, clarity. For 30 years, I'd wondered if I was being too harsh in my judgments of Dennis. Maybe he really was trying. Maybe the failures weren't entirely his fault. Maybe I expected too much. Now I knew better. I climbed back upstairs and found Tom Reed's business card in the kitchen drawer. Tom had handled the paperwork when Martha and I bought this house 30 years ago. He'd built a solid reputation in Evergreen's real estate market. My fingers were steady as I dialed his number. Reed Realty, Tom speaking. Tom, this is Percy Warren. I need to urgently sell the house on Maple Grove as quickly as possible. A pause. Percy, you just got out of the hospital. Maybe you should rest first. Think everything through. No, Tom. I need investor buyers. Cash. Maximum speed deal. Do you have such clients? Well, yes. There are several. But this is a serious decision, Percy. Are you sure? More than sure. Can we start tomorrow? Another pause. Tom's professional instincts were warring with his concern for my health. If you're certain, yes, I have 3 investors who might be interested. Properties in your neighborhood have been selling well. But Percy, this is your family home. Have you discussed this with Dennis? Dennis is traveling. I'm handling this myself. All right, then. I'll make some calls tonight. Set up showings for early next week. You'll need to have the place looking its best. After I hung up, I sat in Martha's old chair and looked around our living room. By the time Dennis returned from Hawaii, this house would belong to someone else. His childhood home, his inheritance, his safety net. Gone. Just like my $8,000. Just like 15 days of my life while I fought to survive. Some lessons I realized could only be learned the hard way. The alarm clock's harsh buzz pulled me from restless sleep at 6 a.m. My first night back in my own bed had been fitful, interrupted by chest pain and the weight of what I'd set in motion. But when I sat up and looked around the bedroom I'd shared with Martha for decades, determination replaced discomfort. 4 days until Dennis returned. 3 days to prepare for Tom's investor showings. The phone rang as I finished my morning coffee. Percy, how are things going with the preparation? Tom's voice carried professional concern. I surveyed the living room with critical eyes. Dust on the mantelpiece. Scuff marks on the hardwood floors. The general wear that accumulates when a house becomes just a place to eat and sleep rather than a home. Almost ready. When is the first showing? Tomorrow after lunch. Are you sure everything's ready? You sound tired. I was tired. The physical exertion of yesterday, cleaning, organizing, making the house presentable, had pushed my recovering heart harder than Dr. Green would approve. But time was running short. Everything's under control, Tom. The main thing is speed. After hanging up, I got to work. The living room came first. I moved furniture to vacuum underneath, wiped down every surface, touched up scuff marks with paint I found in the garage. My chest ached after 20 minutes, forcing me to rest on the couch until the discomfort passed. But I kept going. The kitchen required more effort. Years of bachelor cooking had left grease stains I'd stopped noticing. I scrubbed them away methodically, replaced the burned-out light bulb over the sink, tightened the loose handle on the cabinet door that had annoyed Martha for years. By noon, my shirt was soaked with sweat, and my hands shook from exertion. The shortness of breath worried me, but not enough to stop. The bathroom was next. I replaced the cracked tiles around the bathtub, grouted the loose ones, installed a new shower head. Simple repairs I'd been putting off for months became urgent necessities. Each task pushed my physical limits a little further. Each completed repair brought satisfaction that surprised me with its intensity. This wasn't just house preparation, this was erasure. I was systematically removing every trace of the life Dennis expected to inherit. Every improvement made the house more attractive to buyers, more likely to sell quickly for cash. The afternoon brought a call from Tom with updates on interested investors. 3 solid prospects, all cash buyers looking for rental properties in Evergreen's growing market. The first showing is set for 2 p.m. tomorrow, he said. "You've done good work, Percy. The house shows well." By evening, my entire body ached, but the transformation was remarkable. The house looked better than it had in years, clean, repaired, ready for new owners. I sat in Martha's chair with a glass of water and my evening medications, surveying what might be my last night in this house. Tomorrow, if things went well, I'd accept an offer. By the weekend, Dennis would return from Hawaii to find his inheritance sold. The thought should have brought regret. Instead, I felt only cold satisfaction. Some bridges needed to be burned completely. Tom's sedan pulled into my driveway at exactly 2 o'clock, followed by a sleek BMW with Colorado plates. Through my kitchen window, I watched a woman in an expensive suit emerge from the passenger seat. Polished, professional, carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than my monthly pension. My stomach tightened. Everything depended on the next hour. "Percy, meet Sarah Collins," Tom said as I opened the front door. "She specializes in residential investment properties throughout the Front Range." Sarah's handshake was firm, businesslike. Her eyes immediately began cataloging details. The fresh paint on the porch railing, the new welcome mat, the gleaming front windows I'd spent yesterday morning cleaning. "Lovely location," she said, though her tone suggested she was already calculating rental income potential rather than appreciating the mountain views. The tour began in the living room. I'd arranged the furniture to maximize space, removed family photos that might make the house feel too personal for an investor's vision. Sarah took notes on her tablet, measuring rooms with a laser device, checking the condition of hardwood floors I'd spent 2 days refinishing. "Original oak throughout," Tom highlighted. "Percy's maintained this place beautifully." Sarah nodded absently, running her finger along the windowsills I'd scrubbed clean, testing the ceiling fan I'd repaired, opening and closing the closet doors I'd rehung properly. Everything I'd pushed my recovering body to accomplish over the past 3 days. In the kitchen, she examined the updated fixtures, the new backsplash tiles I'd installed despite the chest pain, the spotless appliances. Her expression remained neutral, professional. "The bones are solid," she admitted, checking the water pressure at the sink, "but the market's been challenging lately." My heart rate increased, though whether from anxiety or physical exertion I couldn't tell. The basement inspection worried me most. This was where Dennis had ransacked my savings, where evidence of his betrayal lived in the torn-up floorboards I'd repaired. But Sarah simply noted the furnace condition, the electrical panel upgrades, the dry foundation walls. Back upstairs, she settled into Martha's chair, my thinking chair, and opened her portfolio. "The house is in decent condition, but your price doesn't match the current market. I can offer 40% less." The number hit like a physical blow. 40%. That wasn't negotiation. That was insulting. "That's too low for such a house," Sarah shrugged, closing her portfolio with a snap. "Then look for another buyer. Good luck." She was standing, shaking Tom's hand, walking toward her BMW before I could fully process the rejection. Professional, efficient, completely indifferent to the desperation she'd probably sensed but chose to exploit. Tom lingered after her departure, his face creased with concern. "Percy, don't be discouraged. This is normal for the first showing. Tomorrow we'll try with another client." Tomorrow. Dennis would return tomorrow evening, expecting to find his childhood home waiting like a safety net he could continue abusing indefinitely. Instead, he'd find... What? A father who'd failed to even sell the house he'd threatened to sell? "Who's the next client?" I managed. "Robert Chen. Different type of investor, more reasonable, less predatory. He appreciates quality over quick profits." After Tom left, I sat in my thinking chair and stared at the mountain peaks, visible through windows I'd cleaned with my own hands. 40% less. The insult stung almost as much as the practical failure. But I wasn't done yet. The silence felt heavier after Tom's departure. I remained in Martha's chair, watching afternoon shadows stretch across floors I'd polished until my back screamed in protest. 40%. The number kept echoing in my mind like a taunt. Dennis would return tomorrow evening. 24 hours to salvage a plan that had taken everything I had left. The house around me felt different now. Not like a home I was preparing to sell, but like a fortress under siege. Every improvement I'd made, every hour of painful labor, every compromise with my recovering heart's limitations, all rejected with casual indifference. But Sarah Collins had taught me something valuable. She'd shown me the difference between what I wanted and what the market would bear, between justice and revenge, between principle and practicality. The phone felt heavy in my hands as I dialed Tom's number. Tom, I need results tomorrow. I'm ready to lower the price by 20%. A pause. I could hear him recalculating, reassessing the property value in light of my newfound flexibility. That's much more realistic. I have an investor who's looking for exactly this type of property. He can pay cash. Cash. The magic word that made everything else negotiable. Cash is perfect. When can he look? Tomorrow morning. Percy, why such urgency? What happened? The question I'd been dreading. Tom was too smart, too experienced not to sense the desperation behind my sudden willingness to compromise. But some truths were too complicated, too personal for professional relationships. Personal reasons, Tom. Just trust me. Another pause. In the silence, I could hear him weighing his curiosity against his respect for client privacy. Professional discretion won. All right then. Robert Chen, 9 a.m. sharp. He's serious about expanding his rental portfolio in mountain communities. After hanging up, I walked through the house one more time, seeing it through different eyes now. Not as the family home where I'd raised Dennis, where Martha and I had built 30 years of memories. Not even as the inheritance Dennis assumed would always be waiting for his next crisis. I saw it as a commodity, a tool, something to be traded for the satisfaction of watching my son learn what consequences actually felt like. The kitchen where Martha had taught Dennis to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. The living room where we'd watched him graduate high school on televised ceremonies during the pandemic. The basement where he'd hidden during thunderstorms as a boy, later returning as a man to steal from his unconscious father. Every room told the story of opportunities wasted, lessons unlearned, kindness transformed into weakness. Tomorrow morning, Robert Chen would walk through these rooms and see rental income potential, maintenance costs, return on investment, numbers on a spreadsheet instead of memories on every surface. By tomorrow evening, Dennis would return from his stolen vacation to find his safety net gone. No family home to mortgage for his next crisis. No elderly father to bail him out of his next poor decision, just consequences. I made myself a simple dinner and took my evening medications, trying to ignore the chest tightness that had nothing to do with my heart condition. Tomorrow would bring either salvation or complete failure. Either way, I'd know where I stood. Outside, the Colorado mountains stood silhouetted against a darkening sky, as permanent and immovable as the resolve that had replaced the weakness Dennis had counted on for 38 years. Sleep had been impossible. I'd spent the night alternating between Martha's chair and the kitchen window, watching for headlights that might signal Dennis's early return. Every sound, wind through pine trees, distant traffic, the house settling, made my pulse quicken. By dawn, exhaustion and anticipation had merged into a strange clarity. This was the day everything changed, one way or another. At 8:30, I positioned myself at the front window and watched Tom's sedan approach, followed by a modest Subaru with a ski rack, a practical mountain car for a practical investor. Robert Chen looked nothing like Sarah Collins, mid-40s, wearing jeans and a fleece jacket, carrying a worn leather briefcase instead of an expensive portfolio. When he shook my hand, his grip conveyed genuine interest rather than predatory calculation. "Beautiful property," he said, surveying the mountain views before we'd even entered the house. "These elevations maintain value better than lower altitude communities." The tour proceeded differently from yesterday's clinical inspection. Robert asked questions about the neighborhood, the history of the house, winter maintenance requirements. He examined the same features Sarah had dismissed, but with appreciation for quality rather than focus on minimal investment. "You've maintained this place well," he observed, running his hand along the banister I'd sanded and stained. "Original craftsmanship like this is rare in newer developments." In the kitchen, he tested cabinet doors, checked the stove's functionality, examined the plumbing connections I'd tightened. His movements suggested someone who understood both construction and rental property management. "The layout works well for families," he noted. "Mountain communities need more quality rental options." The basement inspection went smoothly. Robert focused on mechanical systems, storage capacity, and structural soundness rather than searching for flaws to exploit in negotiations. Back in the living room, he settled onto the couch and opened his briefcase, not for documents, but for a calculator and measurement notebook filled with handwritten observations. I like the house. Location is excellent. Condition is decent too. I can pay cash, but let's reduce the price another 10%. 10%. Reasonable. Fair even. Is this your final offer? Final. And I can close the deal by end of week. End of week. Dennis would return tonight to find his inheritance already sold, the paperwork in motion, his safety net legally dissolved. Deal! Tom, prepare the documents. Robert's face brightened with genuine satisfaction, not the cold triumph of someone who'd exploited desperation, but the pleasure of a fair transaction that benefited everyone involved. Excellent. Tomorrow we'll start the paperwork. The handshake felt like an ending and a beginning simultaneously. Tom beamed with professional relief, already making notes about title companies and closing schedules. After they left, I stood in the center of my living room, soon to be Robert Chen's rental property, and felt something I hadn't experienced since Dennis's phone call from Hawaii. Complete satisfaction. Not the bitter satisfaction of revenge, but the deeper contentment of a plan executed successfully despite obstacles. I'd adapted when rigidity would have failed. I'd compromised when stubbornness would have cost everything. Most importantly, I'd proven, to myself as much as to Dennis, that this old man still had teeth when pushed too far. The afternoon stretched ahead like a gift. Hours to savor anticipation before the confrontation that would reshape our relationship permanently. Dennis would arrive, expecting the same weak father who'd always been there to clean up his messes. Instead, he'd find a stranger who'd learned the difference between kindness and foolishness. Tom's office smelled like fresh coffee and leather chairs, the scent of successful deals and satisfied clients. I arrived early, carrying a manila folder with my identification documents and banking information, ready to transform promises into legal reality. All documents are ready. Tomorrow we'll sign the main agreement. Tom spread the preliminary papers across his polished desk, pointing to signature lines with professional precision. Each page represented another nail in Dennis's coffin of assumptions about inherited security. Excellent, and I'll receive the cash immediately. Yes, the buyer will bring a bank check. I signed each document with steady hands, my signature flowing as smoothly as it had 30 years ago when Martha and I first bought this house. Full circle, except this time I was choosing freedom over family obligation. The next 2 days blurred together in systematic preparation. Room by room, I packed Dennis and Pris's belongings with methodical efficiency. Their clothes, her makeup collection, his golf clubs, their shared photographs from happier times. Each box told the story of a life lived carelessly, assuming someone else would always clean up the mess. Designer clothes bought on credit. Expensive electronics purchased during financial crises I'd resolved with my checkbook. Wedding photos where they smiled like people who'd never faced real consequences. The physical work pushed my recovering heart to its limits, but emotional detachment kept me moving. These weren't family treasures anymore. They were just objects belonging to strangers who'd stolen from their dying father. By March 30th, I'd loaded my truck 3 times, transporting everything to Rocky Vault's storage facility on the industrial side of town. The place looked exactly right for this purpose. Anonymous, efficient, forgettable. I need a storage unit for a short term, I told the clerk, a bored young man who barely looked up from his computer screen. For how many months? For an indefinite period. I'll pay for a year in advance. Cash payments simplified everything. No credit checks, no references, minimal paperwork. Unit number 47 became the temporary home for Dennis's life, accessible with a key I'd hide under the doormat, as planned. Loading the final boxes into that sterile concrete space felt ceremonial. Childhood photos mixed with adult failures, Little League trophies next to unpaid credit card statements, the archaeology of a man who'd never learned to stand on his own. I locked unit number 47 and pocketed the key, knowing Dennis would find it eventually when desperation forced him to actually read my instructions. My own packing took less than an hour. 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of Martha's jewelry, and my father's mining tools. Everything else could stay with the house. Let Robert Chen deal with furniture and appliances. The moving truck I'd rented sat loaded and ready outside the empty house. Tomorrow, after the final papers were signed, I'd drive to the small apartment I'd rented in Willow Creek, a place Dennis would never think to look, in a town where nobody knew our family history. Standing in the doorway of the house where I'd raised my son, I felt no sadness, only the satisfaction of a job well done and justice properly served. Some lessons required complete destruction of old patterns before new growth could begin. The morning felt different, crisp with possibility rather than heavy with obligation. I arrived at Tom's office carrying the keys to 2847 Maple Grove for the last time, ready to sign away 30 years of family history without a backward glance. Robert Chen sat across from me at the conference table, his cashier's check already prepared and waiting. The amount was exactly what we'd agreed, enough to secure my independence and prove my point without leaving me wealthy. "That's it, Percy. The house is officially sold." Tom's ceremonial tone carried genuine satisfaction. He'd earned his commission through professional competence, helping a client achieve goals he didn't fully understand, but respected enough not to question. "Thank you for everything, Tom. You helped tremendously." The gratitude was real. Without Tom's expertise and discretion, this plan would have remained just an angry old man's fantasy instead of executed justice. "What will you do now? Where you move on?" Tom's curiosity was natural, professional. In 30 years of knowing me, he'd probably never seen me make such a dramatic life change. "I have a plan, don't worry." Mystery served my purposes better than explanation. The fewer people who knew my new address, the better Dennis would learn to accept permanent consequences. The bank visit took longer than expected, converting a large cashier's check into cash-raised eyebrows, and required additional identification. But by noon I walked out with enough bills to fund my new life comfortably. The house waited for me, completely empty except for the note I'd been composing mentally for days. I'd written and rewritten the words in my mind, crafting each sentence to deliver maximum impact while maintaining dignity. The kitchen table, Martha's favorite spot for serious conversations, seemed like the right place for my final communication with Dennis. I sat down with a legal pad and began writing in careful handwriting. "Dennis, when you read this, the house has already been sold. Your belongings are in storage unit number 47 at Rocky Vaults. Key is under the doormat. Don't try to find me. It's pointless. For 30 years, I've been your safety net. Every financial crisis, every poor decision, every consequence you couldn't face alone. I was there with my checkbook and my patience. When you got fired, I paid your mortgage. When you drank away your bonus, I covered your utilities. When you needed vacation money, you helped yourself to my emergency fund while I lay unconscious in intensive care. 15 days I fought for my life in that hospital room. 15 days wondering if I would survive to see my family again. While I struggled to breathe through tubes and machines, you were sipping tropical drinks with money stolen from your dying father. You called me dramatic for objecting to your theft and abandonment. You hung up on me because international calls were expensive. You treated my near-death experience like an inconvenience to your vacation schedule. Now you'll understand what it means to have no safety net, no father to bail you out, no family home to mortgage for your next crisis. You're 38 years old. It's time you learned to face consequences like an adult. Don't contact me. Don't look for me. Don't expect reconciliation or forgiveness. This isn't cruelty. It's education. The School of Hard Knocks has officially opened, and tuition is everything you took for granted. Your mother would be ashamed of what you've become. I'm ashamed I enabled it for so long. Learn to stand on your own 2 feet, Dennis. It's never too late to become the man I hoped you'd be. I signed it simply, Percy Warren, and left it propped against the sugar bowl where Dennis would definitely see it. Walking through the empty rooms one final time, I felt only relief. No ghosts of family dinners or Christmas mornings haunted these bare walls, just the echo of my footsteps moving toward a future built on self-respect instead of family obligation. The front door closed behind me with a satisfying click. Sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows woke me at dawn. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The ceiling was different. The sounds outside my bedroom were new. Then memory flooded back, bringing satisfaction instead of confusion. I was free. My new apartment in Willow Creek was modest but sufficient. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, mountain views from the living room window. Everything a 67-year-old man needed to live comfortably without the weight of family drama pressing down on his shoulders. Coffee tasted different here. Better, somehow. The simple pleasure of morning routine without wondering when the next crisis would arrive, when the next desperate phone call would interrupt my peace. At exactly 9:30, my phone began buzzing. The screen showed Dennis's name and number, followed immediately by another call, then another. I let them all go to voicemail, watching the missed call counter climb, with scientific fascination. By noon, the number had reached 73. 73 calls. I guess they finally understand what it means to be left with nothing. I scrolled through the call log, noting the timestamp progression. The first few calls came 20 minutes apart. Probably Dennis trying the house phone, then my cell, then calling back casually. By hour 2, the intervals shortened to 5 minutes. By hour 4, constant desperation. The voicemails painted a predictable picture without my needing to listen. I could imagine Dennis's voice progressing from confusion to anger to panic to pleading. Pris probably grabbing the phone to add her own brand of entitled outrage. None of it mattered anymore. Now they know how it feels to come home and find nothing. Like I found an empty hospital room while they were enjoying themselves with my money. Through my new living room window, the Colorado Rockies looked exactly the same as they had from my old house. Eternal, unchanging, indifferent to human drama. The mountains had watched Martha and me build our life together, witnessed Dennis grow from an innocent child into a selfish man, observed my transformation from enabler to educator. This isn't revenge, it's a lesson. A lesson about consequences and responsibility. My phone buzzed again. Call number 74. I turned it face down on the coffee table and returned to my morning newspaper, reading local Willow Creek news with genuine interest. The community center needed volunteers for senior activities. The library was hosting a book club focused on Western history. A hiking group met every Wednesday for mountain trail walks. Life was beginning again at 67, and it felt like the first honest life I'd lived in decades. The calls would stop eventually. Dennis would exhaust his panic, accept his situation, and start the difficult process of building adult resilience. Or he wouldn't, and he'd spend his remaining years blaming everyone except himself for his problems. Either way, it was no longer my responsibility. I'd spent 30 years trying to raise a man who refused to grow up. Now, finally, Dennis would face the choice every adult must make: learn to stand alone, or fall down and stay there. I hoped he'd choose to stand, but if he didn't, at least I'd know I'd done everything possible to teach him the difference between kindness and weakness. The mountain peaks caught the afternoon light, glowing gold against the blue Colorado sky. Beautiful, permanent, peaceful. Just like the satisfaction settling into my bones as I contemplated a future built on dignity instead of manipulation, respect instead of exploitation, chosen solitude instead of obligated rescue missions. Dennis had taught me an unexpected lesson through his betrayal. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to succeed or fail entirely on their own merit. At 67, I was finally ready to live for myself. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.